Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you. My name's Alice Twemlow, and I am the founding chair of the department here, which has recently acquired an extra long title. Thank you very much. We are now, henceforth, to be known as Design Research, Writing and Criticism, really just exposing the tools and foundations that lie beneath the practice of criticism. So we're at a really exciting juncture in this program. And because of that, I invite you to join us this Saturday for our open house, which takes place between noon and 2 p.m. Tradition will be revived, where we serve mimosas and donuts. So even if you have no interest in design research whatsoever, I do encourage you to come. My son will be there, checking out the donuts for sure. So anyway, no, it'll be a really interesting session in which we explore. I've invited alumni of the program, some students and faculty who will be, discussing with us how they use research in their practices, whether that's a design practice, a writing practice, curatorial practice, or whatever. And hopefully they've got some really, really interesting stories to share. So please join us for that, or recommend it to people who might be interested. Another plug is for our upcoming 2-week summer intensive, which takes place here during the summer in June. Action-packed, full of life and activity and unique experiences. So if you want the fast-track version of it all, then have a look at that. There are postcards around the room, and you might want to talk to me after the lecture. And then the final thing you need to be aware of is, as a Decrit fan, is our upcoming conference where our students will be graduating and presenting their thesis research. And they will be standing alongside some really interesting keynote speakers we've gathered, including Nicholson Baker, who I was telling, yeah, I know, it's so funny. I was saying I think this is the 4th time I've invited him now, and the poor guy, I think it's just to get rid of me that he's finally coming. But anyway, I'm very, very, very excited about that. We have Justin McGuirk, the British architecture critic, will be moderating. Eric Chen, all the way from Hong Kong, where he's setting up a new museum of architecture and design, and we'll be reflecting on that. And from the West Coast, we've got Sylvia Lavin and Peter Lunenfeld, brain boxes from UCLA. So a good lineup, plus our amazing graduating students. Okay. So we're actually kind of approaching the end of our spring lecture series, actually. We've got 3 more in the hopper. But this is a series that the first-year students of the program work to conceive, curate, and host and present. So in the moment, I'm going to turn it over to them. But just to say, I've really, really enjoyed the way in which the various themes have been so nicely interwoven over the past few weeks. So thank you for the way in which you've put this together, first years. I've been really enjoying it. And tonight's speaker has been set up really nicely by last week's speaker, who was Philip Tiongson, talking about apps and iPad applications and the death of the book and so forth. So you've got a great straw man here for anything you wish to present tonight. And yes, the other dates, we've got Ellen Lupton coming, and then Peter Bilak will be sort of ending off the series, talking about the new magazine that he's launched, and there will be a launch party for it as well. So lots of fun there. But now it's my duty and pleasure to bring to the podium one of our first-year students who will be doing the introduction of our speaker tonight. Please welcome Lauren Palmer.
Thank you, Alice. That's great. So, yes, my name's Lauren. Hello. Welcome. So, start by giving a little anecdote. In February, I flew to Los Angeles to attend the art book fair there, and it was crowded. There were tons and tons of people browsing the tables with books, zines, pamphlets, and other printed matter. At times, I had to fight for space to look at the things that I wanted to look at. So it was reported that more than 15,000 people visited the Geffen Contemporary at MoCA over the 4 days, and some speculate that the numbers could have been much more than that. So I find this a bit confusing. In an industry that has been somewhat plagued with the talk of its decline recently, here I was, surrounded by fans, lots of them, of the printed page. So clearly there's a market for those who want to buy books that are expertly designed, crafted on quality paper. So I need to make sense of this contradiction. So here at Decrit, we consider the book to be the longest form of design criticism. And it's important for us to understand the many changes that are taking place in contemporary publishing. So we need an expert to help us navigate this turbulent sea change. So we have Sharon Helgason Gallagher, who is the president and publisher of ARTBOOK D.A.P. She's our ideal captain. Necessarily attentive to the future of the industry, for over 20 years, the company has selected, cataloged, publicized, and distributed numerous titles on visual culture from the world's most respected museums and fine arts publishers. Gallagher is also the co-publisher of Metropolis Books, whose titles include Vishaan Chakrabarti's Country of Cities, Fritz Haeg's Edible Estates, and Architecture for Humanity's Design Like You Give a Damn. In addition, the group runs ARTBOOK at MoMA P.S.1, ARTBOOK at Walker, and pop-up stores at fairs and exhibitions like the LA Art Book Fair. So I'm so eager to hear about the connections that she's going to draw between the benefits of reading books and riding bikes, helping us to steer us into the future of publishing. So it's my pleasure to introduce Sharon Helgason Gallagher.
Let me start by saying that if after I speak we want to turn the discussion to a more nuts and bolts about publishing, whether in print or digital, or about any more of the statistics from the publishing industry, I'm very, very happy to do so. That, however, is not what the bicycle led me to think about. I work with visual books about visual things in our world: art, photography, architecture, design, and visual culture. The Metropolis Books imprint and the titles that our company, ARTBOOK D.A.P, distributes for museums and international cultural publishers depend mightily on the writing of good authors and, hopefully, the reviews of good critics. So I'm especially thankful to the SVA, the Department of Design, Research, Writing, and Criticism, Alice Tremlow and Lauren Palmer for having invited me to speak with you this evening. To me, you are not just any audience, but caretakers of our future in visual literacy. I hope that by the end of the evening, I will have left you with some challenges that you'll be willing to embrace with both hands. My thinking about books has benefited greatly from ongoing conversations with my colleagues at ARTBOOK D.A.P. and with the extraordinary publishers around the world with whom I'm fortunate to work. I'd like to particularly acknowledge and thank Thomas Evans, Lars Müller, Jan Voss, my husband and co-worker Skuta Helgason, and my daughter Theodora, who has taught me much about close reading. Will the printed book go the way of the horse and buggy? There, I have voiced the dreaded question. Some people think yes, comparing the spread of the internet generally and the e-book specifically to the ascendance of the automobile. Publishing industry statistics certainly tell a story of very rapid change over the last 7 years. Up until last year, the trend of explosive growth for e-books contrasted with flat or even declining sales for print books, and it seemed unstoppable. Looking at the final industry statistics for 2012, Publishers Weekly reported total e-book sales rose 44.2% to 2012. That was from the preceding year, to 30 billion, and accounted for 20% of book revenue in the year, up from 16% the year before. The gain in ebook sales offset a flat performance by print sales, which held virtually even at 12 billion between 2001 and 2012. The early numbers for the year of 2013, final numbers won't be available for about another month, have, however, been a surprise, with e-book sales slightly falling or holding even rather than surging ahead. Is this a one-year blip or a leveling of e-book sales? Probably too soon to tell, especially when the health of the bricks-and-mortar bookstore business is in question. Certainly, print publishers and bookstores have cheered this flattening and the rise of e-book sales. But to take a contrarian position for a moment, what if this slide in consumer adoption of e-books is less a slowing of interest in reading digitally than fatigue or disgruntlement with existing e-reader devices? Certainly, no e-reading device has of yet captured the public's imagination the way the iPhone has. But what if one did? What if the perfect e-reading device were invented? Would the book then go the way of the horse and buggy? The bicycle, which did not go the way of the horse and buggy, has a lot to tell us about the kind of design that doesn't go extinct, but instead, to deliberately revive an old English word, is futurable. Is that a lovely word? This evening I'd like to try to understand why the bicycle still lives and why the book may share a similar future. The book and the bicycle, considered together as exemplars of good fit in design, can also tell us about the qualities other designed objects need in order to stick around. They may even help us to envision a better e-reading device, one that will be futurable. It's hard to imagine the trajectory of human history that has taken us to where we are today in the world without the wheel. Unlike most every other human tool, from the sword to the vessel, the wheel has no direct precedent in the natural world. That's except for some little things that go around on a particular bacteria, but that's neither here nor there. The wheel simply did not evolve in the natural world as something that we can see. As Richard Dawkins explains, quote, "The wheel may be one of those cases where the engineering solution can be seen in plain view, yet be unattainable in evolution because it lies on the other side of a deep valley, cutting unbridgeably across the massive of Mount Improbable." Humans, in their making of things, did cross the massive of that Mount Improbable sometime about 3,500 BC in Mesopotamia, with the invention of the potter's wheel. It's not until half a millennium later, around 3000 BC, however, that we find the first wheeled vehicles, wagons and chariots pulled by horses. Another 4.5 millennia had to pass before we see a Renaissance drawing from 1493 by Giacomo Caprati, a pupil of Da Vinci's, of a fantastic design for something that looks very, very much like a bicycle, but the drawing's authenticity is not established. It's then 2 centuries later, in 1696, that the French mathematician Jacques, I'm not sure of the pronunciation, Ozanam, issued a challenge to the scientific community to invent a self-powered or human-propelled vehicle. As David V. Harrelly in his Bicycle the History writes, Ozanam not only issued an important challenge to the inventive community, one that would ultimately yield the modern bicycle, but he also proudly revealed his own solution in the book's frontispiece, a massive 4-wheeled carriage designed by Dr. Elie Richard, a physician from La Rochelle. According to Richard's plan, a gentleman seated comfortably in the front has only to steer the front axle using a pair of reins. Meanwhile, his servant, standing at the rear, drives the vehicle forward by stepping up and down on 2 reciprocal planks tangential to the rear axle. The planks were spring-loaded and suspended by a rope and pulley system, so that when one sank under the pressure from the driver, the other rose until reaching its apogee, whereupon the planks reversed directions. Each plank in turn activated a gear affixed to the rear axle, causing the axle to turn, thereby rotating the wheels. The entire driving apparatus was neatly hidden within the body of the carriage. Never mind that the pair would be better off walking, especially the poor lackey. As Tom Ambrose points out in his well-illustrated The History of Cycling and 50 Bikes, the idea of a two-wheeled rather than a four-wheeled invention that would deliver a human-propelled vehicle must at the time have seemed like the least likely of the options. As he points out, there was a big problem to solve, the problem of balance. But I wonder whether cultural perceptions were at work as well. I'd like to speculate that that propulsion was seen as the work of animals, of horses, of mules, of donkeys, in other words, of four-legged creatures, so that the idea of two-legged self-propulsion by man was seen as an affront to human dignity. Or, as in Ricard's drawing, that two-legged propulsion would have to be undertaken by a hidden servant rather than by the gentleman himself. That a dignified man, distinguished from the beast by his bipedal stature, would prove to be his own source of propulsion was, I suggest, a revolutionary change in thinking. And it was, in fact, only later, during the era of revolutions, at the turn of the 18th into the 19th century, that the bicycle as a two-wheeled rather than four-wheeled vehicle becomes conceivable. The earliest of these two-wheelers were running machines. The Celerifier in 1817 and the Laufmaschine, or Draisine, developed by the German Karl Dreis in 1819. Shaped very much like a modern bicycle, with two wheels rather than four, one in front of the other, the running machine was propelled by the running of its rider, who would gain momentum by sort of hopping and following the momentum of the wheels. He could glide between his strides. Well, still a long way off from the modern bicycle, the conception of a two-wheeled rather than four-wheeled vehicle was the decisive turn. The hobby horse and the dandy further evolved the two-wheeled running machine. But it was in 1839 that the Scotsman Kirkpatrick Macmillan invented a two-wheeler propelled forward by pedaling. The Michaud velocipede followed in the 1860s, and a period of very rapid experimentation followed, with pedals driving ever larger front wheels in the attempt to gain speed. In 1885, John Kemp Starley made the design change that is essential to bicycles ever since, a chain drive to drive the bicycle's rear wheel, which then allowed the front wheel to be free to be used independently for steering. Refinement of the idea followed, and by the late 1800s, the bicycle was no longer a fashionable plaything of the aristocracy, but a viable means of self-transport. As the bicycle became more broadly popular on both sides of the Atlantic, women took to riding it as well. With the approach of the new century, the bicycle became literally the vehicle for women's liberation. In the famous words of Susan B. Anthony from 1896, "Let me tell you what I think of bicycling. I think it has done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. It gives women a feeling of freedom and self-reliance. I stand and rejoice every time I see a woman ride by on a wheel, the picture of free, untrammeled womanhood." At the same time, the bicycle also became progressively cheaper and available to middle class and working men. As David Horton has written in his excellent essay, Social Movements in the Bicycle, pioneering women cyclists were wealthy, but the late Victorian age saw the beginnings of the bicycle's gradual transition from a high-status vehicle of the rich and leisured classes to one increasingly affordable to ordinary people. By the mid-1890s, new methods of mass production and fierce international competition led to falling prices. More people became able to afford bicycles, which became significant to another social movement, socialism. He then cites a remarkable story, which is that of the Clarion Bicycle Club in Birmingham, England, whose members rode their bicycles around the countryside to distribute socialist tracts. I think that's just a beautiful image. Actively socialist or not, the middle and lower classes saw the geographic radius of their lived world dramatically expanded by the bicycle. One study even cites the ongoing genetic health of small Welsh communities as a function of reduced intermarriage and new genetic diversity, brought on by trips on the bicycle. That was especially for my colleague who comes from Wales, Thomas Evans. It was during these same decades that book publishing, as we know it today, came into its own as an industry. The 19th century witnessed numerous advancements in printing technology, starting with the Stanhope Press in 1800, which was the first book press made completely out of cast iron, leading up to the development of the mechanized rotary press, the use of roll paper, and the invention of linotype and monotype. By 1880, about 1/3 of all books published in the U.S. were cheap paperbacks, often printed from material pirated from England. International copyright protection soon became an issue and was granted under the Berne Convention of 1886, and the U.S. Copyright Act of 1909 still largely remains the framework, even after all of the amendments and changes to the way we think in the United States about copyright today. As books and newspapers became cheaper and publishing became a business, literacy rose, and as literacy rose, the demand for books further increased. By 1900, the literacy rate was 95% for U.S.-born whites, 86% for foreign-born whites, and 55% for blacks. By 1920, the rates had increased to 98%, 87%, and 77%, respectively. In the book and the bicycle, we have two seemingly unlike objects of human design and technology that yet each speak powerfully of the image of the free working man and woman of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Men and women who control where they go and what they think. The book and the bicycle were enabled by the democratization of society, but also key tools in that process. They are both objects that express a particular way of being in the world, that of the new man and the new woman. If we step back and consider the book and the bicycle as design objects in their own right, they are, I suggest, more similar than first meets the eye. As forms, once we abstract from the difference in their physical scale, they both exhibit a striking bilateral symmetry with the two wheels of the bike and the facing verso and recto pages of an open book. In each case, that bilateral symmetry is repeated internally as a component of the design in smaller form, in the bicycle, of course, by the pedals, and in the book, by the recto and verso of each individual page. But in both cases, that bilateral symmetry is also profoundly asymmetrical on closer examination, the same way that the arrow of time is asymmetrical. While it's technically possible to pedal a bicycle backwards for a bit, or to flip backwards through the pages of the book, both objects have a strong unidirectional motion that animates them. The bicycle to move forward in the direction of the front wheel, and the book in Western cultures to move from left to right from the front of the book through to the back. This left to right motion in the book is of course echoed in smaller form on the page itself in the movement of the eyes along the lines of type in left to right reading languages. The rider is positioned roughly in the center of the two wheels, just as the reader sits roughly in the center of the book. As the rider pushes the pedals, turning the wheels, so the reader, as we say in English, turns the pages. Both the bicycle and the book afford their user a profoundly time-based experience. While a collector might look at a designer bicycle or a rare book with a detached aesthetic gaze, this misses the essence of each, to be ridden or to be read. And we say that the road unfolds before the rider, just as the story unfolds for the reader. Imagine this: if Donna Tartt's bestseller, The Goldfinch, were printed in one long strip as one line of continuous type, the reader would go on about a 2.5-mile ride to read the book. Whether the journey is through physical or literary space, what is distinctive about both the bicycle and the book is that the journey itself, and not simply arrival at the destination, is what we enjoy. Arriving at the end of a book, like putting the bicycle back up on the rack at the end of the day, is bittersweet. And neither bike nor book is consumed in the process of riding or reading. These are objects that remain available for reuse at a moment's notice. Regardless of how any particular book or bike is designed, as basic designs, each nicely satisfies Dieter Rams' 10 principles of design. 1, they are each the result of technical innovation. 2, profoundly useful. 3, they are aesthetic in the sense of positively affecting the user's well-being. 4, they are understandable once invented. It is quite clear how each of them works. 5, they are unobtrusive. Their form is fully functional. 6, they are honest. They deliver what they promise, a ride or a read, though particular books of the self-help genre may, for example, promise more than they deliver. 7, they are long-lasting rather than disposable. 8, they are thorough down to the last detail, the spikes, the gears and tires, the pages, the binding, the paper, the typesetting. 9, they are environmentally friendly, certainly a valid claim for the bicycle, but also now for the book, using recycled papers and environmentally friendly inks. And 10, each follows easily the principle of what Rams calls as little design as possible. Neither has extraneous features. They are both lean objects. When I first went through this checklist, I was surprised at how easily both book and bicycle met the criteria, almost as if the criteria had been devised from them rather than for them. And so I began to wonder whether or not there are more design criteria that we can learn from when looking at them as objects. And I think that there are. Here are 7 suggestions for further criteria by which to evaluate design based on what I love about the book and the bicycle and what is similar about them. First, the book and the bicycle each address their user both as an individual in an extended period of solitude and as a member of a larger world. While one can read aloud or to someone or be read to, the book in principle and basically is meant for reading alone. But yet, even by oneself in one's room, a reader is not alone when reading. The author is, of course, always present, and the book form, in being essentially a multiple, always implies other readers, and indeed a public or audience, with whom one can agree or disagree on the merits of a book. The bicycle, too. While a bicycle meant for two merits a song, it is a permutation, not the bicycle as such. One rides alone, but always by definition in and through a larger world. Perhaps the ability of certain objects to engage our oneness within a larger world, to respect our individuality while at the same time situating us, is a quality of good design. Second, these objects require us to have skill to use them. But the skill they require is one we can learn as children. It is also a skill that we can only acquire by using them. Interestingly, learning to read and learning to ride a bike occur at roughly the same age of child development, generally around the age of 5 or 6. This is a civilizing stage of childhood, when the child moves out from the close range of home and family and explores a neighborhood, which becomes my neighborhood. It is an age of discovery that my world is within another world, a world that is in turn within a larger world. It is the birth of the future citizen. Learning to read and learning to ride a bike mark a qualitative leap for the child, an accomplishment rightly marked by enormous pride. I did it! I can ride a bike! I can read! I think all of us have those memories inside of us. Let me read you a wonderful short chapter from the French writer's Paul Fournel's book, Need for the Bike. The section is entitled Miracle. Sorry, this needs... Miracle. The bike always starts with a miracle. For days you tremble, you hesitate. You tell yourself that you'll never get rid of that hand guiding you under the seat. My father and mother took turns holding on to me, as did no doubt one of my cousins, from whom I'd inherited the little bike, whoever it was who was in charge of my miracle. They'd taken off the training wheels, and I took to the field in front of our house and followed its slope down, gaining momentum. I was looking for the magic moment that makes the duo stay up when it should go down, and I wiped out and got up again. And then one morning, I no longer heard the sound of someone running behind me, the sound of rhythmic breathing at my back. The miracle had taken place. I was riding. I never wanted to put my feet back down again for fear that the miracle wouldn't happen again. I was in seventh heaven. I did a tour around the house, proving to myself that I could do 4 right turns. For a number of weeks, I always preferred turning right. I was no longer afraid of anything. I rocketed past the clump of nettles that usually scared me. I rode panic-free down the long, lonely road beside the house and came out in front again in triumph, but still unable to raise my hand in victory salute. I've never gotten over this miracle. Learning to swim didn't move me like this, and it was really only learning to read that equaled the intensity of learning to ride. Within a few months, then, I learned in that order, riding and reading. At the age of 5, that Christmas, I had arrived. I knew what my work would be and my leisure. Highly recommended book. So perhaps a principle of good design that we can derive from the book and the bicycle is that good design is itself a teacher, and a teacher who rewards accomplishment. Third, as objects within our economic life, both books and bicycles are distinctive in having almost exclusively positive externalities or side effects. Externality is the economist's term for the values of a product that are unpriced by the marketplace. Usually, like pollution, these externalities come to our attention because they're negative. Their costs fall upon the community rather than upon the individual who bought it. But instead of pollution or disease, the bike yields exercise and health as side effects and reduces gas consumption. The book gives us learning and knowledge and creates a literate polity. These are positive rather than negative externalities. This suggests, from an economic standpoint, that they are underpriced at the individual level, but welcomed at the social level. Maybe this is why Carnegie chose to build libraries and why Mayor Bloomberg has left us with the bicycle program. From the minimalist credo of leaving the smallest footprint possible, perhaps we need also to value design that yields the largest positive externalities, objects that overflow or exceed their market value, objects that are generous. Fourth, the book and the bicycle are both human-scaled. They fit the human body. The history of early attempts to design the bicycle demonstrates the incredible trial and error of getting this right. The technology and invention and good design had to come along to get the size of the wheels, the positions of the pedals, the weight of the frame, and the grip and cushioning of the tires just right. The book, too, has a relation to the human body. More or less the size of a human face when closed, more or less the width of the shoulders when opened. In both cases, these objects have that Goldilocks quality of being just right, not too big, not too small, for human bodies. Fifth, in addition to being scaled to fit us, the book and the bicycle both invite us not just to use, but more importantly to enjoy distinctively human features of our physical makeup. What is the bicycle if not a celebration of man's bipedal form? No longer do I need a 4-legged beast to carry me forward. But what can we say about the book? Here let me speculate that the book, with the left, right, left, right, left, right rhythm of its movement, is a celebration of our distinctively lateralized brains. For me, a great book, as an example of bookmaking, affords a powerful somatic experience, a distinctive choreography of movement in my brain from left to right, from right back to left, from spatial to temporal processing, from visual to verbal and back again. There is a pleasure in the thick temporal symmetries of the dance steps my brain takes as it progresses through the book. Perhaps the simple feature of bound sequenced pages with fronts and backs and openings and closings turns out to be not simply a tool, but a remarkable space-time forum in which one of the most distinctive features of the human brain, its bilaterality that is distinctively different, can experience itself. Sixth, both bike and book combine passive and active experience in seamless unity. John Howard's famous remark, it's on quite a large number of posters I found out from Google, "The bicycle is a curious vehicle. Its passenger is its engine." This statement goes just to this strange phenomenon. On the bike, I am at once riding and at the same time pedaling furiously. In the experience of reading, we find a similar paradox. We are actively reading as readers, but it is the writer who is telling us the story. The ability simultaneously to experience activity and passivity is arguably the locus of our seat of moral judgment, our ability to be both self and other at the same time. Most Western languages have evolved to have distinct active and passive voices. The ancient Greeks, though, had a third, the middle voice, the position of agency. Changing the voice from active to middle voice, for example, distinguished between to build a road and to make a journey. As if I were still able to say, I read myself a book, or I ride myself a bicycle. Perhaps good design is design that affords us that middle voice in our actions. Those are 6 thoughts about good design, inspired by riding bikes and reading books. A 7th principle summarizes: good design is that which affords us to act consistently with there being such a thing as a future for human bodies. In ancient Greek, one use of the middle voice was logon poieste, to deliver a speech. It was always said in the middle voice, not in the active. I take the middle voice this evening as requiring me to deliver something to you from the standpoint of our shared agency. My challenge to you as writers on design is modeled after that French mathematician's challenge to create a self-powered vehicle. Urge on, champion, and proclaim virtue in design that affords us to celebrate ourselves as thinking and reading not human beings but human bodies in the digital age. Go forth and deliver speeches that make what is good futurable. And I'm happy to open this up to discussion and thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Wow, we're all ramped up now. Will you join us for some questions over here?
And also, buy this book.
Yeah, that sounded great. If you'd like,
I'll pass it around, but you give it back. I borrowed it.
if you'd like to take a seat right there, and Lauren will be here, and I'll be. Oh yes, please do. And I will be the lemon in the middle. Was that what you expected?
Oh, it was amazing. Better. So much better.
I have some stats if you want them.
I will give you the microphone.
Okay.
I'll just kind of talk. But I want to just thank you again for the amazing talk. And I wanted to ask first, what do you think is going to be lost when kids are starting to learn how to read on a screen instead of holding a book?
Which happens earlier than 5 or 6,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes.
1.
For me, there's a loss of the sense of where you are. So I think certainly all of us would agree that you're reading through a book and you think, oh, I would very much like to read that sentence to my husband. you're reading on, you're several chapters later, your husband arrives home, you go right back to where it was on the lower left-hand side, and there it is. It's right there. Pages are arbitrary. You reset the type, the type flows differently the next time around. Except in some artist books or concrete poetry, there's nothing special about this line ending there or that line ending there. But the pages end up being an incredibly useful way to organize visual information and to take that temporal flow and make it spatial. Part of the challenge with the ebook is that although of course it's not like this because it doesn't exist except when it's being seen in a certain sense, except as code, it's as if it's a long, long roll of toilet paper coming up through the screen. It's back to the days of the scroll. That is certainly the problem with the illustrated book, where, I think if you asked a designer of illustrated books, well, what are the two things you'd like to really, really change about doing visual books? I don't think most of them would say I'd like to get rid of the page and allow the user to change the typeface. But that is what the ebook is like. So I wonder, especially for children, where their sense of the whole goes when it's not on the screen. Like, where's the rest of the book? Mm-hmm. And that sense of me being a master of the whole book. I'm here, page 1 is here, page, 200 and what's an even number? It's not 264. My signatures are off. At the back of the book, I can master the whole thing. I think that we haven't yet come up with a viable commercial device in the ebook world that can make that happen. In another talk I gave, I talked about the first kind of books to receive very, very heavy adoption in the ebook world were romance novels. And a lot of people say, well, of course, people are embarrassed to be seen reading a romance novel. Number 2, most of that reading goes on late at night. You can just download it right from Amazon. You don't have to have gone and buy it. It's one-handed reading. Whatever. But I think there's a more interesting point to make about it, which is precisely the books that we call page turners that work very well on the e-screen. Page turners are books where the page gets in the way. You want to hurry up and find out what happened. You're not there to linger, except insofar as you get to linger on yourself. On the description of what's going on. You're not there to reread the language. And so I think for page turners, the whole reason we want to turn the pages is we don't care about the pages. Let's hurry up. Are they going to do it together? What's going to happen? But with literary fiction, with poetry, and I won't even get to the visual book, that loss of the unit of vision is, I haven't seen anything that works. And we are probably more active in the field of trying to take these poor visual books and stuff them in that device than our competitors. It's not there yet.
But let me just follow up on this, because no, you take it. When we're talking about this, you've got this kind of binary going between the printed book and the ebook, but I'm sure it's not like that in publishing. There's a very sort of interrelated sort of process between the two, surely. And could you talk a bit, in the sense that I would imagine as things are developing, you're thinking more about publishing platforms, which would have different outputs in different ways, rather than this kind of contrast.
That is true, but for the illustrated book, nobody's nailed it yet. Certainly there was the feeling when the iPad came out. Remember that day? Oh my God, this is going to be it. And there was the feeling that, well, what we're going to all do is develop apps. That was. I actually gave a talk in which I said that's what's going to happen. about 5 years ago, and I think people are still, in my world, are still cursing me because it costs $60, $80, $100, $200,000 to make an app. And when you ask people who are visual book publishers, well, how did that work out for you? It was a great marketing tool. That means none sold. This is not a sustainable way to go. My own personal view is that it's the web where it's all going to happen. But that's a while off yet. There is also the problem with the ebook is that the marketplaces are instead of copyright being governed by law and by the difficulty of reproducing the physical book, it's only guaranteed by the plastic around the reader. There's no encryption. And so you end up being in these walled gardens of controlled by the manufacturers of the devices. So for nonfiction, yes. For the visual book, the jury is still out. Something will happen, and certainly as someone who works with museum catalogs, yes, let's put the checklist online. Great. There are many, many things like that that are beginning to happen, but have I seen yet a beautiful ebook? No, I haven't. Or a beautiful, the Getty spent a large sum of money on 8 different museums were given the opportunity to experiment with using the web form. Okay. It's not pleasing, it's functional. We have a long way to go, and Erin, I'm sorry I've forgotten her name, maybe someone knows, who was in charge of the Met's digitization and web strategy. Erin Coburn, extremely intelligent woman. I asked her at a talk, can you name for me one website that you would call beautiful? And she said, no, not yet. And I think we're starting to see things. I think some things will happen with type animation, but I don't think things are as...
I suppose that I misphrased the question because I think I'm pointing more to what you were talking about in sort of across digital media, so that, the use of the website for a checklist, for example, interrelated with the book for the things that it's good at, which is the visual images, and the ebook for the downloadable materials.
Yes.
So, but
This isn't to naysay. The idea that somebody in Argentina could get one of our books like that, that's amazing to me, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Yeah. Sharon, to kind of build up on the idea of the relationship between the exhibition and its catalog, where do you see that going then? You see it going to the web, or we're still going to need that printed pamphlet or book?
I think there'll be some reconception. I almost wonder whether we might actually go a little bit backwards as we go forward. I'm much older than most of the people in this room, but not all of them. But I'm sure you remember those. I think they were from Horizon. They were like very, very thin cloth-bound volumes that just had picture plates in them. And I sort of think maybe we'll get something like that with some very brief, very readable, the more poetic text. There's been a lot more commissioning writers rather than just academics or curators to write. And then the scholarly apparatus perhaps will live on the web. I think it's an exciting time, and people are trying and experimenting, but it's not as easy as it looks.
Right. Can we switch a little bit to design books? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sure. Irrespective of the medium. Just design is the problematic. Can we talk about that? And which, in your view, have been the most successful books that address design, whether they have that in a title or not, that you've been involved in, and what kind of topics should we be looking at to fellow books like?
Well, this is hard for me to do without. I don't like people who sit at talks and promote their own companies. However, no. I'm I might pass on that question or turn it to you or the audience. I'm curious as a publisher. I don't want to sit here and promote Vishaan's book or Aki Bush's.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
He's spoken here, and we were all very, very interested in that. But, I think using a particular lens of cities rather than design perhaps is a way forward, and I wondered if that's part of a strategy in publishing right now, or do you have...
What gets your attention in acquisition meetings? What comes in is just that's a great topic.
I think there's a lot going on with mapping. It wasn't NIE, it was 010. It might even be as old as 10 years old now. That atlas of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think that's an excellent piece, modest, excellent piece of bookmaking, and it continues to sell. No big reviews. It's had a checkered distribution history. A lot of things going against it. That's a good example. I think there was a great interest in mapping, but that's just a market. I think that's intellectually interesting, but there's an element of marketplace trend to it as well.
Yeah, we were just discussing it last week.
Okay.
So very appropriate.
We talked a little bit about this too, but in your conference, the Book Live conference, you were saying that we're in the midst of a mediological change, Dubray's term, one that is huge in itself and more enormous still in its aftershock. So I just wanted you to kind of unpack that a little bit about books, or your idea.
I guess if books do go the way of the horse and buggy, if there's one little shop in Paris and one in New York, maybe a lot in Germany, one in Florence, where it's as if you're going to buy leather boots to ride your horse on your estate. I really see that as the end of civilization. There is so much of our culture that we need to understand how to recreate if we're going to get rid of the book as the vehicle, the library, things that have good sides and bad sides, but it's so woven in that when you hear people, it will all go digital. For example, my daughter is 13. I don't think she's had a textbook in her. She's now in the 8th grade. There are no textbooks, so a great deal of time is spent researching on the web to find which website, in addition to the one given by the teacher, which website knows the most about whatever kinds of clouds, right? That seems to me an enormous waste of time. Maybe it's interesting as a one-time thing. Let's figure out how hard it is to do research. But people who write textbooks and textbook publishers, although I'm not one of them, spend a great deal of effort. There's a beginning, but there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And while that may not be true about the most advanced art and literature that we want to do, when you're learning linear equations, yes, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're not right at the stage yet where you get to invent new kinds of functions. And that notion, and again, I'll come back to what I was talking about earlier, this sense that, okay, it's now March, I should be about 3/4 of the way through the book, and I can actually feel it. When we started the year, I was at the beginning, now I'm this way through. I think we're losing some of the big measures of time in our lives once we give up the book.
Should we take some questions?
Sure, yeah, definitely.
I guess anyone have a question?
Hi, my name's Meg. I'm a first-year student. Just with the whole idea of, the book possibly becoming extinct, do you have any feelings about the places books were sold, like these historic bookstores that have sort of closed? And recently Rizzoli downtown is under threat of being demolished. And it interests me because we've preserved artist homes, we've preserved writers' homes, but do you think there's ever going to be that moment when we start preserving these historical...
I think and in Germany and until recently in many European countries, there was a very strict legislation which has gotten diluted through the sorry, I won't go there. Through the effect of the Euro regulation designed to promote the flourishing of the capitalist economy throughout Europe. But there's legislation of various kinds in various countries which would be illegal in the United States of America, called net book pricing. It's something that if I brought this up to an American, they would look at me as if I had come truly from another planet. In Germany, it is illegal to discount a book. So, and what is the effect of, and only books. It is perfectly legal to discount a dress. Books have been singled out as something very special for the culture. And in fact, in any country except the United States, Australia, Canada, and England that is not Anglo, an English language country, there's also the big question about preserving your language. So the book is seen as a social good. When I talked about it as having a positive externality, that the book does something de plus. There's something more to the book, and it's worth the government's while to make an exception for it. Can you imagine this happening on the floor of the United States Congress? It's completely inconceivable. And yet, why are there still so many independent bookstores in Germany? Well, that's a good question. Obviously, its borders are porous nowadays. People are buying Amazon books on internet companies that are at deep discount and bringing them in. That is the law of our land. It would be illegal for me to tell one of the customers, one of the retailers to whom I sell a book, what to price it at. So it's a very... Is it possible, though, to protect these stores? Damn right it is. I just gave you an example of how it happens. That is a larger cultural, political, and economic question. And do I see that happening here in the United States of America? I do not. Yeah.
Hi. Kind of latching on to what you just said. How do you reconcile the fact that you see a book as a social good, and the fact that, places like Amazon offer deep discounts and actually make the book accessible to many?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a hard call. There are two sides of the coin. And I think that argument, I think you could go beyond that to, it's a question of Main Street versus, it goes beyond the book, that question. It also deals with a mom and pop store, regardless of whether they're selling books or whether you're going to CVS to buy your toothpaste or whether you go to the local drugstore and it costs you more. The shop local movement, people are aware of these issues. But that is not specific to the book. It was certainly, why did the book, of all things, become the first object to be sold online? Like, couldn't she have chosen something else, right? In fact, I think there's a very good reason for that, which is that and I did an experiment many years ago. And I asked a number of friends to do it, and they found the same thing. This was easily must have been about a decade ago. I asked people to type in something that they would reasonably search for, but that wasn't a commercial product, some kind of knowledge that they would search for on the internet. And I asked them to do it once just with that word and count the number of results that Google said in its helpful way that it had come back with. And then to do a second search specific with that same phrase, but specifically excluding the words alongside of it, publisher, ISBN number, book for sale, and a couple of other keywords. And usually I found there was getting about half, in the sense that some future historian of the internet might look back into the very early days and go, oh God, why did all those publishers give their catalog copy away for free? Because that's a lot of where the internet started. And of course, why was it books that Google wanted to scan? Well, because there were already words that a computer can read. Why was it that Jeff Bezos chose books? We already had an ISBN number system. We had digital text. They're searchable. We're a bizarre industry in which we create a huge number of different products every year with very few units of each, opposite of the auto industry. So it lent itself to that. But the discounting question, all I can say is shop local.
Mm-hmm. And they said, oh my God, it's going to be 2 months wait. We only have 4 copies. And then she said, would you like to take the Nook? He was goldfish, plopped it on the Nook.
Yeah.
So I took it home and I kind of looked at it for a while in this little plastic bag and I kind of touched it and it sat there for 2 whole weeks. And I had really no interest in even touching this thing. Mm-hmm. So I returned it back and I went and bought the real book at the stand. And there's something about, I don't know, it's kind of what you were talking about a little bit, but it's about the sensuality.
Yes.
And it's about our senses and holding the book and touching the pages and having it there. And it reminds me a little bit about movies. You know, I mean, I love going to films. Mm-hmm. And there's films where I'll say, well, that film, I'll watch it on Netflix. But then there's the films you go into the theater. Yes. You know? I mean, it's rich and it's colorful and it's large and you're in it and it's dark. And you don't want to waste a good film on Netflix. I think that, you know, there's books you'll go by and then there's junky things.
And I think that's true. And all of us use the internet all day long, all the time. It's an amazing thing. I'm not a Luddite. I just think there are all sorts. What has happened to the book industry? We got the 1-2 punch. We got the internet thing. We got the financial crisis. And the 1-2-3 punch, and we got the ebook coming, all within the space of 2 years. It was no other. It was not fair.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question just to follow up on your last comment about the industry. Are you thinking about other business models that might incorporate more?
I have a vision, which is we're selling some highly text, very limited visual books just fine on the Kindle and the iPad. Ugh. Am I proud of them? Not so much. I can see, and we have a number of little prototypes made of what it would be like to try to come up with something that worked on the web. And the web is, we kind of need a Lady Bird Johnson to come along for the web to beautify, pick up your litter, because it's there's so much flashing stuff all over the place. And I think that will happen. I think people will realize that more and more of that just is noise and isn't accomplishing the objectives of advertising. But I could imagine something that was more on the web. When I get to go from my horrible PC with my Windows Explorer browser, because I'm the business one in the office with the Excel sheets, when I get to go to Stacy or Ranya's office and work on the Big Mac, wow, I want to design books for that, not for the Kindle. So yes, I can see it. It won't be the same. It'll be something else. But I think in the spirit, the part of every publisher that's also a teacher, we love to share things. That's why we make multiple copies of things. I think there's something that can be done, and the idea again that this is accessible all around the world, which books are not, especially expensive art books. That's the thing to go for, I think.
So, as a fellow publisher,
how do you read something like this? And as compared to reading a book. And so a book, yes, you have Frieze, and you have Haeg, et cetera, new forms of reading. But we have a new phenomenon of how we can read today. And it's not the Kindle, it's not the app, it's not the web. It is, we have new ways of reading. We have new ways of looking at the world around us in our literary perception. And whether that's a textbook, whether that's a novel, whether that's a monograph, whether it's a collection, etc., those same sort of modalities are out there and change on a regular basis. And we can't say that we are going to rely on our standard print format.
Well, I think you're right. I guess I'm just saying it's early days with respect to books that are visual, which is different, and this is a divide in the industry. Illustrated art books were always a funny little ghetto. We were always far more international than anybody else. Our price points are considered absurdly high. We measure things in dollars, not in units. Big, it's a very different world, and this has really rent that apart. I can imagine something, maybe what we're looking at is on a nice big screen, I'm looking at a painting, and maybe it's animated type. I'm kind of fascinated by what can be done with animated type, so that it's the type that's going in and out, and it's the picture that's stable. I mean, I think a lot of it's all up for grabs. I just haven't seen anything yet that I would call beautiful in the way that there are few books that I would call beautiful. Of course it's subjective. That's its job.
Is your typical monograph beautiful? No, of course not. It's 6x9. It's got a Times Roman 11-point font, etc. It's not beautiful. And so you're taking a look at this from purely from a art book standpoint. But I mean, what is reading? What is design? Reading design. Reading as perception in the 21st century. To a certain extent, you're saying I just take a look at this from 20th century ideology with regard to what print and understand is, and what page. I'm
speak tonight, but we did invite her because she's a publisher of ARTBOOK. Yeah, no, I know, and I think your point is that there are very interesting experimental.
But even basic things. I mean, the EPUB format, which is the format that you use if you want to get it into the Kindle or the Fire tablet. If you don't get it onto the Kindle or the Fire tablet, you just threw away 70% of the marketplace, right? So if you're not grant funded, there's a starting line. So you're stuck with that, and they don't even use that format. They use the Mobi format. And again, this format was designed for text-only books. The big innovation with EPUB 3 was the ability to show Korean letters and mathematical formula. Woo, woo, said all the art book people. We're waiting for this all to develop. Meanwhile, you see interesting things like what Alex Soth is doing with his photography books, where instead of this vertical model of things bubbling up from the deep or whatever they're doing up down there underneath when they're not visible, is what he's chosen. He did something very different on his website, and sort of a group of them have done this in the photo book community, where things are moving, and it's sort of contra to all good web design, you going horizontally. And I think that's far more effective. Can you monetize that right now? No, because you can't get it onto a copyright-protected device owned by one of the major players. There you are.
I mean, this has really opened up an interesting conversation, so I think that's what we should probably move to the bar, right? All good conversation. That's great. But before we do that, please join me in thanking once again Sharon.